Hi, everybody. It's Susan, and I'd like to speak to you today about Uranus. We're finally here. Uranus is moving into Gemini on the 7th of July. So, a little bit more than a week away from this video. I'm recording this on Sunday, the 29th of June. This is going to be pretty much the 7th of July for most people, except I think in the Pacific time zone, it's just going to be around midnight going from the 6th to the 7th. But Uranus will be here in Gemini for a brief little sojourn until it leaves and retrogrades back into Taurus on the 7th of November. So we're getting an initial taste of what this longer Gemini transit will be, which is roughly 7 years between now and the beginning of 2033. So it actually is like 7.5 years, but spread over 8 years. And maybe I'll give you the dates up front so we get the technical bits out of the way. That's very Gemini. As I mentioned, July 7th till the 7th of November is when we get our first hit. And this is what I'm focusing on today because this is what we're looking at here as an ingress chart. It's like a birth chart of a moment in time, or an event chart, we call that. And it gives us the flavor of this initial ingress. And then we'll have another one coming when it goes back into Gemini on the 25th of April, 2026. So we're going to have from the 7th of November till the 25th of April, Uranus back where it is roughly now. It goes back to 27 degrees of Taurus and then comes back into Gemini. So we're in a really big new phase of time, but we're only just getting in, and then we're kind of dipping back into what we've already experienced over the last year or so. There's a retrograde. I'm going to just mention that off the top so I don't forget, because I think it's interesting that the retrograde of Uranus will happen the day before the eclipse of the 7th of September. So on the 6th of September, Uranus will be retrograding in the first degree of Gemini. And then from the 6th of September, it takes its time to get back into Taurus on the 7th of November. Then it continues until it stations direct on the 3rd of February, 2026. So interestingly, Uranus will be direct when Saturn and Neptune move back into Aries, which is also February. So again, that February energy will be quite dynamic. The November energy will be extraordinarily dynamic. Again, we'll look at these later on because there's so much information. This is also very Uranus in Gemini. There's so many things happening that I think it's better to take it in smaller chunks, because otherwise it's just all speculation. It's going to be building on what's already happening, and we can't predict with any certainty what's going to be happening with Uranus. And that's particularly why it's interesting that it's actually going to be stationing retrograde at an eclipse, because that early September, the 7th of September, and that whole period of time around that couple of weeks before and after will be very unstable. Right. So that will be our Virgo friends having their birthday at that time. So good luck with that. We'll hold your hand as we go through this. I happen to be one of those astrologers who prefers the myth of Prometheus to describe Uranus. I feel that that describes the energy of Uranus much better than the Uranus energy, which is close to the name, but not necessarily to the energy that Uranus brings to us. It's very disruptive energy. And so Richard Tarnas was the first, at least that I know of, to point out that actually it does resemble the myth of Prometheus. If you want to know much more about that, read Cosmos and Psyche, which is an extraordinary book by Richard Tarnas. And just in a nutshell, Prometheus was the Greek god of the protector of humanity. And he was the one who gave fire to the humans. And up until that time, it was considered only in the domain of the gods. And it's that technology, this new aspect of technology it's very strong now with Uranus in Gemini, that is something that can save us and heal us and nourish us, or it's something that can quite literally kill us and harm us. So there's that double-edged sword. He was punished by the gods for doing this, Zeus, and which is Jupiter. And he then was subjected to an eternal suffering, which is that his liver would be ripped out by a vulture every day for the rest of his life. So, not a happy story, but shows the level of disruption, but also the sense of a vision, a higher vision that comes from the divine. And this is also very Uranian. My focus today is on more the individual, and I will go sign by sign, but I will also just here and there interject in terms of our collective story as well. Sorry, I'm still working on this cold. Well, this whatever the thing is that still lingers. And so if I cough, excuse me. It's been a ride. Um, right. So many things to say. Where to begin? I'm going to delineate first and foremost the Uranus and Gemini, and then we're going to look at the actual chart because the chart tells us the energy that we're moving into and how we're all kind of grappling with that and how that will affect the next 4 months to come. It's important to look at the ingress chart because if you only take Uranus in Gemini as a standalone, we're not getting enough information, really. It's a kind of a cookie cutter way of looking at things that doesn't really tell enough of a story. Anyway, cookie cutter, Uranus in Gemini is very much the disruptor around communication. So we're taking the planet of disruption, unexpected change, advancements in technology, flashes of genius and innovation, and into the sign of communication and everything that we do together. It's a social sign. Gemini is the very first social sign of the zodiac, an air sign. And it's mutable air. So Uranus is all about shape-shifting and ducking and diving and doing things in new and innovative ways. And it resonates very strongly with Gemini. Now, Gemini has its good and bad qualities, like every sign, one of which is that there's a duplicity that's implied as well. The duality of the two, the ruler of Gemini is Mercury, which is the shapeshifter, but it's also the messenger of the gods. And so as the psychopomp, we get messages coming from the divine through our mind, through our capacity to integrate and intellectualize things, which is Mercury, that notion of understanding the human perspective, understanding the divine perspective is possible because of Mercury. And this is the rulership of Uranus now. So we have to expect that things will be constantly changing in a rapid way for the next 7 or 8 years in a really intense way. Prior to this, in Taurus, which is a fixed earth sign ruled by Venus, we had a much more stable sense of what was still our reality, more resistance to change, more of a sense of disruption around change. This will be disruption, but in a way that's more subtle. Air is very subtle, harder to detect. And as a result, we will sometimes be thrust into periods of change, and we already are kind of in that in the air era that we're in, where we're not really aware of what's going on. And this is also what this particular chart describes. So it's going to feel a little uncomfortable, and it's always going to be a little bit like, I don't know why I feel this way, but I don't feel right. I don't feel entirely comfortable. We hear a lot of AI now, so we're hearing it in advertising, we're hearing it on YouTube videos. If you follow anything on social media or whatever, you're hearing a lot of AI, especially voices that are AI generated. People are copying Carl Jung's voice and creating nonsense videos, implying that he said certain things, or the great Alan Watts and his gorgeous voice is talking, spewing nonsense now. So we're having all these things created that is really like, wait, what did he say that? No, he didn't say that. And so we're grappling with something on a level of trust as well. And this is also where Gemini comes in because of that slightly superficial kind of a little bit too quick, light-footed, light-hearted energy that can be carried by Mercury. We're going to be in an era where there's a lot of destabilization around trust. Information and using information will be quite dynamic. So we have to be literally on our toes in that very mercurial way. We just have to be really light-footed and quick-witted to understand, is this AI or is this real? Often in the advertising at least, you hear a flat affect, meaning that there's no emotional resonance in the voice. You're not hearing the usual kind of up and down melodic resonance with the voice, that you're hearing things coming through information and it sounds human, but it also feels robotic. So there's an internal jarring that happens as well. And I think we can expect a lot of this. It's going to create a restlessness that is both intellectual but also neurological. So we need to take care of ourselves and not spend too much time in the domain of the unreal, meaning the information domain, the technocracy that we're living in. That's another aspect of this on a more collective level that I think will change quite dramatically, which is that the tech bros, the oligarchy that we're living through. This is going to change over the next 7 years. Now, with Uranus, we know that change is disruptive. It's going to be at times shocking as well. It's another Uranian word, and unexpected. So what we are experiencing now as this kind of energy of fixed dominance and technological or technocratic dominance that we're experiencing can also break up. It's not necessarily clear whether that's positive or negative in terms of a global or personal individual sense. But with this particular chart, we need to pay attention to how we feel around how we speak and what we say. So I'll delineate that in a minute. So it's quite an important time to be really aware of people's motives. And that's also something that helps to manage what Gemini is all about. What are the motives behind the interaction? Gemini is a very social sign. We've got Pluto in Aquarius, which is all about society, and it's creating a trine to Gemini. Trines are easy flowing energy. It doesn't necessarily mean positive. And again, positive is something that is a personal assessment. It's what feels positive and beneficial in one moment can turn out to be extremely unhelpful in another. And the reverse is also true. So a trine is of the nature of Jupiter. It's expansive. It's flowing. It creates ease. But what are we creating ease with? So there's this, again, this technocracy, this oligarchy, this pressure that's coming from mass surveillance, and that's here in this chart. Um, Again, this is for the first 4 months. This is for the ingress. The initial ingress is often the most impactful. And that's why I'm wanting to emphasize so much this particular chart. It's often where we find the most immediate effects or we find the most significant meaning. And that meaning is, again, like a birth chart, it's going to flavor the rest of the journey. Now, it's not all negative, especially on an interpersonal level or the individual level. There's going to be a lot of positivity. We can't grow without change, that's for sure. And Uranus helps to shake things up. It's going to take us always closer to who we need to be on an individual level. And that can be really unsettling because often we get comfortable in a persona, in a way of relating. And again, we're talking about relationship energy, particularly communication energy, the dynamic of connection, the dynamic of families as well, because Gemini rules siblings, cousins, and friends, and people who feel like family. Our neighborhoods, the way that we relate in a day-to-day way, all of these things will be shaken up and changed. Um, we're going to be learning and thinking in different ways. So we can't again know, but what we can be sure of is that inventions and new ideas will come in ways that we thought, wow, I never thought of that before, or how, isn't that amazing? How did they do that? This kind of extraordinary, rapid advance in technology is a signature of Gemini, um, of Uranus in Gemini. It's Gemini too, but especially Uranus in Gemini. Uh, so we can also experience media in new ways of getting information. But as I mentioned before, part of this dynamic is to be able to trust what I'm hearing or seeing for that matter. And so the antidote, let's say, to this is to spend as much time as we can in the three-dimensional world that we live in, the nature around us. Find nature if you live in an urban area. if you are in an urban area, this can be very overwhelming. And since Uranus also rules, or rather, Gemini rules urban areas and, your cityhood, as it were, the people you spend time with every day, your neighbors, the bus driver, the person who gives you your latte every morning, that is going to change. And what that might mean is that there's going to be much more people moving out of cities, so that urban areas will change dramatically. There'll be more of a sense of needing to get away from the urban scope of life, the urban influence. Because with this kind of influence, there's going to be so much buzzing of the central nervous system, the mind, information. It's going to be like living on Times Square kind of 365 days a year. And people will end up with some kind of mental disturbance. It can be really challenging for many people to grapple with. You take a healthy individual, put them in an unhealthy environment, and they will become unhealthy, however resilient you might be. So it's really important for us to know what we need to stabilize. Now, water is a good antidote, even if you can't access a lake or another body of water that's a natural body of water nearby. You take a shower and allow yourself to settle the central nervous system, calm the body down, calm the mind down, and use earth as well, coming directly in connection to trees, directly in connection to something that is tangible, solid, and durable. And this will become a kind of a necessary solution to the rapid chaos of the times that we're in. There's a lot of talk by other astrologers about the war, Second World War. Uranus in Gemini does not denote the Second World War. It denotes the United States' entry into the Second World War. It had already been well underway for over 2 years before the United States entered. And that also comes with its own degree of, we could call it deception. There's some confusion around the bombing of Pearl Harbor. There's a lot of evidence that indicates that that was what is known as a lie hop, meaning let it happen on purpose, as there was some indication already, forewarning that the Japanese would bomb Pearl Harbor, and the administration of the day allowed it to happen, allowed US soldiers to die because Congress wasn't favorable to going to war. The American people were not favorable. They were not interested. They'd gone through hell through the previous decade of Uranus in Taurus, dust bowls and depressions and real difficulty. And the last thing that they wanted to do was go to Europe and fight. But that doesn't generate a whole lot of money. And so going to war was on the minds of the power elite. And we have to think about this very carefully now, because that notion of something happening in the United States is an extremely important signature here as well. The United States has Uranus in Gemini. Mars also is in Gemini in the seventh house of what can be described as open enemies or relationships. And so we know that that is part of the signature of the United States. And each time Uranus has been in Gemini, there has been either the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, or entering into the Second World War, which was done actually, again, against a majority of the opinion of the United States. So we're looking at already a split in terms of what people think is the right or wrong way forward, especially engaging internationally. And this will also erupt without a doubt in the relationship between the United States and the rest of the world. Now, the United States, since the Second World War, has only been 6 years not at war. So keep that in mind. It is time that the US is already at war. It's just that they're never declared. They're not openly or legally declared by Congress. And that's, again, a more political thing. I'm going to get pushback from all these comments, but I'm not talking about the US people. I'm talking about the administration. And so the difficulties that we're in today are a lot about that duplicitous relationship that the United States has with, officially, not the people, with the rest of the world. And this is part of the shadow side of Gemini, not being entirely open. This two-faced aspect of Gemini is part of the dynamic. And when we're talking about a global or a mundane approach to astrology, we tend to have to look at the problematic side rather than, yay, let's all be friends. It's not likely that scenario. So things will be shaken up and divided, new strategies, new relationships, new allies, new way of moving into the world on the United States side. Um, there's lots more to say about that, and that we can keep for another video. But just to keep that in mind, this is a big change. All of the post-war institutions that we're dealing with, NATO particularly comes to mind because Saturn and Neptune are in the 10th house currently in the NATO chart, which is an Aries stellium, which again reminds you that it's not a defensive organization, but an offensive organization and always was. And this is again going to have a huge impact on those alliances like the NATO alliance, which has again kind of spread its wings. And that started, by the way, when Uranus was in Aquarius. Really, that was when NATO started to spread its wings far and wide, where its original remit was as the North Atlantic Treaty Organization to protect the 16 original member countries. Now I think we're up to 34 or some ridiculous number. Because war is profitable, and the more members you have in your organization, the more you'll spend on defense. And we're seeing that pressure to increase defense spending now. It's not coming from a legitimate threat. It's coming from the pressure from the military industrial complex, which wants to make more money. And that's how politicians make their money. So again, this whole dynamic here is going to be always a little bit on the verge of something very unsettling, very disruptive, and we have to stay grounded. We have to stay in a place where we can really feel our presence, our physical presence. Know your neighbor, get to know the person across the street, know people who are different from you. That's also Uranus in Gemini. Connect with people who are vastly different to your usual bunch of friends. And we'll see this, of course, taking shape in the sign by sign delineation for the ascendant sun and moon. I'm just going to interrupt here with a little message about what I'm up to. I'm minimizing my one-on-one sessions with people. Of course, that's what I do. It's how I make my money. I don't monetize my videos. My income comes from seeing you. So you can still make appointments, but I'm booking quite far ahead at this time because I have quite a lot going on during the summer. My beginner's course will be ready towards the end of July. So at the new moon in the end of July, I will be launching both my intermediate course, which is live with me, and the beginner course, which is going to be pre-recorded. And so that will be available that you can take in your own time, at your own pace, and anytime that you want that. And I'll give you more information in a couple of weeks' time. The intermediate course is for learning how I read a natal chart, and especially how you can find your ancestral themes and how you can find the dynamic of relationship or your blockages and things because of what's happened before you're even born. And so this is the way that I read a natal chart with individuals, and I will be showing you how to look for that. So you have to have skill already in understanding the chart, understanding the delineations of a chart, and it's not suitable for people who are really just learning astrology. So if you're up for learning more about how to read a chart, how to understand your own life, your own family, then do join, and that link will be below here. What else do I need to tell you? I think that's it for now. So let's move into the actual chart that we see in front of us. We're going to delineate this chart in a way that helps us understand the energy of this time, and then we'll move into the sign by sign. And also, if you are one of those who skip, I mean, you're probably not listening to this if you are, but if you are one of those who skip the introduction, you will miss a lot of the context of what is going on in your individual experience. So this is another thing that can be really helpful as a way of understanding Uranus and Gemini. There can be such a need for instant information that we actually completely lose context. And this is our modern tragedy. It's already happening, but it's a very important thing to keep in mind that there's a bigger frame of reference that's happening than just your little corner of awareness. So Uranus, when it moves into Gemini, this is actually happening on the 7th of July, 8:48, 13 seconds of universal time. So I do that because people are watching from all around the world. So add or subtract your time zone for most of the world, the vast majority, it's the 7th of July. That's really what you need to retain. When Uranus moves in to Gemini, it's actually moving into a very, very tight semi-square with the sun. And that's a very small, it's considered a minor aspect, but it has a very strong importance for a number of reasons. And I'll start to parse this out, but it's all going to be intertwined with what's coming forward, because as always, charts are relatively complex things and need to be understood fully. That's why when you ask me in the comments section about this one planet or one bit of your chart, I can't actually answer that question. Aside from the fact that that's how I earn my living, and I'm not going to give you a chart reading in the comment section. But actually, it's not enough information because I need to know the whole context of your chart. So do keep that in mind rather than asking, how's this going to affect me? I don't know, because I need to see your chart. I need to see even how old you are. What's your generation? I need to know so many more things about you before I can actually say what actually that represents for you. So what we find here is this semi-square, which means that we're looking at a 45-degree angle rather than a 90-degree angle, which is where the square comes from. And because we have this 45-degree angle, we have something that's a little itchy. There's a couple of things in this chart that are itchy. They're not comfortable. It feels like there's something a wee bit off. Part of this is the sun in Cancer is very, very strongly protective of its emotional stability, um, of the family, of the nation, of what is comfortable, what feels secure. And Gemini and Uranus particularly have nothing to do with any of those topics. They're all about getting to the next thing and expanding and creating something of a bigger vision. So Uranus is, as I mentioned earlier, it's kind of a higher vision for humanity. It's a vision of what it means to be human on a cosmic scale, on a higher consciousness level, and that comes with insight. When you wake up, that awakening happens in a way that it's like the penny drops and something is just obvious to you. What wasn't obvious before is just suddenly obvious. And that creates a whole new perspective, a whole big shift of perspective on you, on your life, on your role. And this will be part of this dynamic, except that a bigger dynamic at the moment is that our awareness, our sense of self, our sense of purpose is very much related to what makes me feel safe and comfortable. So we're already in this kind of itchy, edgy feeling of, I'm not so comfortable with what's going on. It feels really, really edgy. Some people thrive on that. And a lot of people with lots of fire, for example, or people who have a lot of mutable energy in the chart. So meaning Gemini and Virgo, a little bit less for Virgo because it's an earth sign, but also Sagittarius and Pisces. All of them are up for change, up for something new, up for transformation. Not so much when you come to the fixed signs, which are, Leo, Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and then Aquarius. Change comes through resistance and through a lot of reflection. And we're going to see how that pans out with Mars in the Earth sign Virgo ruling Mercury in Leo, which is a fixed sign, and that's ruling Uranus. So first that square, the semi-square, there is the first itch. It's the first feeling of I can't really easily adjust to this. And the other aspect that's quite itchy, but always a little bit under the radar, it's kind of like, I just feel awful, but I'm not quite sure why. Or this just feels a little off, but I'm not yet sure why. Again, trusting the instincts is going to be really important, meaning that you need to clear the slate. You need to keep your mind and channels open to be able to access your instincts. So you're not fully, you're not filling your mind with information, other people's opinions, visual things. You're open and clear and taking on good guidance from your own intuition. We have a semi-sextile that's really tight. It's within 20 arc minutes of a degree, which is super tight. So that's a feeling of being, I like to think of it as being in the lift. You're in an elevator with people too close. Like there's just, it's an elevator for 8 people. There are 9 people in there, and it's kind of like, can't get me out of here. And so there's this feeling of, I know there's people back here over my shoulder, or there's somebody here over my shoulder, but it's kind of rude to turn around, and I don't even want to be here. And so that's this feeling. And it's important because Mercury itself is the ruler of Gemini. As I said before, we now have this dynamic, changeable quality ruling Uranus for the next 7 to 8 years, where previously we had Venus, which was more about um, connecting on a way in a softer way, connecting in a way or change in a way that felt more related to our values, related to our possessions and things. But Venus moves more slowly, and the retrogrades happen only every 18 months. With Mercury, it's 3 times a year we get retrogrades, and we're going to get one just now, as just days after, let's say, I think a week or so after Uranus moves into this Mercury ruled sign. So Mercury itself is really quite slow at this time. It's direct and slow at this time. So it's preparing its retrograde. So that also tells us something. It tells us that there's this kind of feeling of resistance. It's discomfort because we're talking about Mars in Mercury's sign, Uranus in Mercury's sign, Venus in Mercury's sign, and Mercury in the Sun's sign. So Mercury in Leo always has to refer to the sun. What's the sun doing? Well, the sun is in Cancer, as we saw. And this dynamic here between the Leo, Mercury, and the sun is this kind of a solar lunar dynamic of there's a challenge between what the ideas and opinions are, what the wishes are, and what feels safe and secure, what feels heartfelt, what feels connection, what feels secure. And so we're in this for the next 4 months for sure. And this can also be the signature that sticks with us, as this is the very first ingress. Now, who's ruling the sun? It's the moon. And the moon itself is in the early degrees of Sagittarius. It's almost 5 degrees of Sagittarius, but still very strongly opposing Venus and Uranus, which are conjoining in Gemini. And even the fact that Venus is there with Uranus is pulling some of the energy of what we have experienced from Taurus, Venus being the ruler of Taurus, Uranus having just been in Taurus for the last 8 years, 7 years. We have this energy of the relational dynamic, the stuff around money, dynamics around possessions, around what we desire, how we feel in terms of our comforts, and the way that we relate, and all of it in opposition to the moon. And the moon is our emotional nature. And here we see the moon is a little agitated. The moon in Sagittarius is always a little bit focusing forward, just like Uranus does, focusing forward. I'm not really comfortable where I am. I want to kind of go this way. I don't want to be here. I want to be somewhere else. This is also creating a trine between Neptune and Saturn. So there's also maybe an idealization of what's going on. And that's also Sagittarius, idealism. That can lead us in a direction that feels like it would be better if, or it could be better if only. And we have to really, as I mentioned, come back to what is real, what is grounded. First of all, because we have this Saturn at the very beginning of the zodiac, ruled by Mars in an earth sign in Virgo, ruled by this Mercury. So you see how everything is connected here. All of these planets in this chart are directly connected. They're interconnected to each other. Sometimes we have this very clear dynamic where there's one planet in its rulership, end of story. We know exactly what we're dealing with, but we don't here because there's so many moving parts and so many factors of each planet being ruled by another planet. So this is an important consideration. Even Pluto is ruled by Saturn. I give the traditional rulerships rather than the modern. But if we look at Uranus as the modern resonance, let's say, with Aquarius, then there's a huge resonance between Uranus and Pluto. So the rulerships, I think, work best in terms of interpretation when they're given to the traditional rulerships. And Aquarius and Capricorn are both ruled by Saturn. And so Saturn ruled by Mars is part of our bigger story, which is that there's tension and when, the drums of war and the drums of a need for change, a need for reaching out into the world in a different way. Which brings me to this other dynamic, which is the sextile that's there very strongly between Neptune and Venus, again, which can suggest that there are things that we're not really clear on in terms of who do we trust, who should we connect to, who's in, who's out, who's a friend, who's not. And that is a part of the bigger theme here. Saturn is about to be sextiling Uranus. So Uranus will get only into the first degree before it retrogrades. And then by that time, Saturn will be retrograding. So in August, we have this 1 degree trine between Uranus and Pluto and a sextile, so mini grand trine with all of the outer planets at the first degree of their signs. So we're in a phase which will last because this lasts for many years to come. It's not the only time that we have this. There's going to be a moving in and out of this mini grand trine for many years to come. And it's a bigger part of the theme. How do we adjust all of these different needs? And how do we adjust all of these different themes? If I come back to the moon, we find that the moon itself is not at home. It's ruled by Jupiter. So we could say that there's a mutual generosity going on here between Jupiter and the moon, but they're in conjunct, or that's also known as a quincunx. So again, we have an itch. We have this feeling of things are not quite that easy. Jupiter is moving out of the square that it's been in since it entered in on the 9th of June into Cancer, but that square is still very much in force all the way through the middle of July. And Jupiter is also under the beams of the sun until the full moon, basically the day before the full moon in Capricorn, which is about the 10th, 11th of July. And I'll do a separate video on that, depending on your time zone. And so that dynamic, again, is saying that although Jupiter is ruling the moon is being ruled by Jupiter, there's a desire for cooperation, but neither are in an easy space. So Jupiter is restricted by Saturn, trying to get away, restricted by Neptune, trying to get away, trying to think clearly and bring some positive results. And the moon itself absolutely wants to get away. The moon has bigger, better fish to fry, wants to do all kinds of other things. And the agitation is real because it's in this now separating opposition from Uranus, which is emotionally disruptive. So this is a time where we can expect that we're going to feel emotional disruption, psychological disruption. And again, the disruption is at times really, really healthy. It's necessary to shake us out of our complacency. There's a lot of issues around complacency and lethargy that is actually a deliberate, let's say, effect or cause of the use of media, social media particularly. And so we have to be alert to that. So sometimes this being shaken up is actually really positive. It's like, wow, I just realized now how unhappy I am, how uncomfortable I am, how wrong things feel around me. And now I'm ready to do something about that. The action part will develop over the coming years, but at this particular moment, we're kind of feeling stuck in a feeling of generalized dissatisfaction. The moon is also sextiling Pluto, so we're digging deep here. It's an energy of deeper unconscious or psychological issues, again, that affect the collective. If we look at a mundane chart, we look at the moon to reflect the people. People are highly polarized through an idealism. People are really charged up by what is their ideals, their ideology as well, and highly influenced by all of that as well. The moon is moving through the United States ascendant. And again, this is hyper relevant at this time. So the month of July will be quite important for the United States in general, as an administration as well as a people. And I won't go too far into that because the comment section just gets ugly. So Mars is also very, very close now to the South Node, and I will do a separate video on this, but this is not usually happy news. So Mars on the South Node can also be quite karmic issues around a need to sever or let go, say goodbye, possibly at times through violence or difficulty, again, on a collective level. Um, on an individual level, of course, that's going to vary, and that's why I'm doing this as a separate video rather than including that here, so we can see really specifically how that will affect you. And it's really coming very close to the conjunction, a couple of weeks away from the conjunction with the South Node that is going to be actually a trigger for the eclipses in September, because the South Node, when it meets Mars, will actually be at the point where the nodal axis is at the eclipses of the 7th and the 21st of September. So we're in a big arc of change. I don't want you to feel frightened by any of this. I don't want you to feel nervous about the future. It's not going to add anything constructive to the situation. One of the things with the Uranus in a Mercury ruled sign now is that our thoughts can run away with us. And this is always the cause of issues like anxiety, panic attacks, depression, and so on. Overthinking. And with Mercury in a fixed sign in Leo, you might be really stuck on what you think is true. And what I want to keep reminding you is that we're in a period of very fluid information. We don't really know. And one way that you can sort of feel your way forward into what is true is the way that people are giving you information. Are they just giving you facts? That's very Gemini, by the way. Just the facts. Give me the details. What's the temperature? How much does it weigh? How long is it? Just the facts. If things are starting to be a bit embroidered, for example, around these attacks by the US on Iran, all of a sudden now there's a story about a hero, the heroic pilots and the sacrifices that they're making. There are no facts in that. And this is designed specifically to manipulate public opinion, to deviate from the facts, which are not as positive as the spin is currently. And so we're looking at a situation where this is going to be ever more important, and especially because this is the ingress chart that tells us, yeah, this is going to be a big deal. The notion of being stuck on a belief, stuck on my thinking, stuck in a pattern of thinking that is not constructive, not good for me, but also not good for the collective. So life is happening in a flow in every minute. It's not something that happens, in random outer events. So there's certain times in life when things can come quite randomly, but that will usually be when a major transit hits a particular part of your chart, like the angles, the ascendant, the midheaven, descendant, or IC, the Imum Chelae. There will be something major happening in your life. When it's the sun or a personal planet, especially, something will shift in your life. But again, in your life, it can be extremely positive. So think about things in this way. I'm going to try and do my best as we go sign by sign to guide you through what can happen, how you can work with that, relate to that in a way that serves you, because we're being offered an opportunity here to change. We're being offered an opportunity to expand into something much better, much bigger. It may be that it's not reflected in the collective, but doesn't matter. We have to still go in our way. We still have to be in a good place individually, even if the collective is deconstructing, which is very, very likely to be happening. So don't attach your thinking to what's going on outside of you, but come into your heart and soul, your intuition, your gut instinct, and really think about that as well. Really, really consider. Gemini represents the lungs, the arms, the hands, the communication facilities that we have biologically and technologically. And so another way through this is to do breathing, to take care of your lungs, to not vape. Don't vape, don't smoke, don't be dumb. Do things that are good for you. Stay away from the cities if you can. Be in nature where you can breathe deeply and calmly. Relax your diaphragm. Breathe through the nose only, inhaling especially through the nose, trying not to breathe through the mouth. And having said that, too much talking makes you anxious. Too much listening, too much sensory awareness, which is also very Gemini, and especially Uranus and Gemini, will be exhausting. It leads to nervous exhaustion. And so this is a time for silence and retreating into an awareness rather than always verbalizing and externalizing. So if you feel yourself becoming overwhelmed, quieten down, close the mouth, breathe through the nose, don't speak. Try not to, when we're practicing mona, which is silence in a yogic way, it's not just shutting up, it's not just closing the mouth, but it's also silencing the thinking so that the mind starts to slow down. When you get into that mode, it's just like when you turn off a fan, it takes a little while for the blades to stop. It takes a moment for them to slow down and then finally come to rest. So don't stress if your mind is still thinking. It's the nature of the mind to think. It's part of the purpose of that organ. It's going to be, or the brain rather, it's going to be interplaying also with the residual thoughts. So just give yourself time and let things come to rest. Gemini also represents time. Mercury is also, along with Saturn, part of the timekeeping function that we rely on. And so we can really use basic things. Take a shower, breathe deeply, go to nature, basic things. Don't let yourself get overwhelmed with what is likely outside in the world and through the media to be quite chaotic. And there's no way of spinning that positively, except that out of the chaos emerges usually something much better, or at the very least, it's something that we need to emerge. So use your own innovation as well. You are inventive. Don't wait for other people to invent things, and certainly don't glorify people who invent things. Do not make heroes out of people who have used their mind and used their skill, because this sets you up for a dynamic of hierarchical um, disappointment. Let's say this, the heroes always will fall off the pedestal, especially if you are waiting to be saved by them. There will always be a moment of disappointment and anger that also is turned against yourself. So again, when we see this Mercury-Mars dynamic of this semi-sextile, beware of that inner agitation coming from what had been an outer expectation. Uh, so I could go on and on, but we do need to keep these videos relatively short. People are telling me it's too long in the comments. Sorry. Sorry, you wasted your money on this one. So we're going to start with Aries, and we're going to go forward to get Aries on the ascendant. And of course, as I go, well, listen, there's the bells, church bells. I don't know if you're hearing those. This is where I'm going forward because I need to have Gemini, Jupiter. Hold on, I need to have Uranus in Gemini. Oopsie, sorry. Got excited by the church bells. Ah, I see what's going on here. We don't have the house sizes that we need. So there we go. So we'll just get Aries here. Um, So when we shift the chart like this, there we go. When we shift the chart like this, what I'm doing is called derived houses. And so I'm reading as if this were your ascendant, especially if you have Aries ascendant, this will be very strong. But if your sun is in Aries, I'm reading the solar houses from your sun. And if your moon is in Aries, I'm reading the houses from your moon as if it were in your first house. Okay, that's how this works. That's always how it has worked. Suddenly, in the last year or so, again, through the influence of social media, we have people believing that only the ascendant is valid, and that is not true. You can do a derived house reading from any planet in your chart. These are things that I teach. So if you want to learn more about those things, you can check out my intermediate course. I don't do that for the beginners, although that's the foundations of learning the astrology is based on derived houses. Right. So here we have Uranus for Aries in the third house, because Aries chart is the natural chart. And so everything lines up in the natural houses and signs that are originally assigned. So we have Uranus here in the third house, which will very much be affecting you in terms of your local space, the way that you reach into your world on a day-to-day level, the people around you, your neighbors, your siblings, your cousins, the extended family, aunts, uncles. It's also very much to do with choice and choosing. And so you're going to be confronted with everyday kind of aims and goals that are shifting for a very long time. So you're going to be thinking, well, this is what I should do. But then it's like, well, no, more of this I should be doing. And this is something that will continue to operate, meaning that you are going to be at your peak responsiveness, let's say, or creative output, because you're going to be constantly like a kind of picking up on the zeitgeist, and you're going to be picking up on what is true in your environment, where you think, I don't know, this is what I need to do. Aries is really good for that, and that's because Gemini's on the third. There's quick response time because Gemini on the third is like I'm in tune intellectually, emotionally, in my communication connection to my neighbors, to my local space. I'm in tune to that, and I can react quickly to it, and so it gives that impulsive nature. One of the reasons we have the impulsive nature of Aries, and and so for Aries, this is really dynamic. You can have a lot of change around the way you communicate, around the words that you use, around the insights that you can have, incredible insights that you can have. I'm born with Uranus in the third house. Although mine is combined with Pluto, I'm part of the Uranus-Pluto conjunction generation, but also a Mercury ruled sign. And I get ideas coming like popcorn. And the challenge here will be to ground them in something and allow that to take form. So it's a really good thing for you to, if you like actual pen and paper, I recommend that for a lot of biological and other reasons. Just write things down or doodle them out, or have a place where you keep in your phone, maybe your notes always available, where you're giving yourself a voice memo or a note, because you're going to be having loads and loads of ideas. You also have Pluto in the visionary house, the house of your future. So especially in these first couple of years, let's say 3, 4 years, particularly leading up to 2030, you're going to be having a lot of this interaction by trine between Pluto and Uranus in Gemini, Pluto in Aquarius. So your visionary, sort of high-minded sense of self is going to be on high alert. So we're going to get a lot of insight and input and creativity and inventiveness from Aries types, from the Aries model. It can also be quite disruptive on a mental level for that very same reason. Uranus in the third house is difficult to switch off. Remember what I said in the beginning about switching off the fan. You need to take time away from distraction, away from over communicating, away from being over informed, because it's just coming all the time, and it can lead to exhaustion. It can actually lead to a psychological or mental exhaustion. And of course, that will exhaust the body, and then the whole system collapses, especially as your ruler at this ingress is in the sixth house, in the Mercury ruled sign of Virgo. You will want to be careful of overworking, overdoing. The South Node here is telling you you've got to change your everyday habits. This needs to look different. And that will be part of your dynamic for quite some time to come. So we also want to keep in mind for Aries, follow your ruler, follow Mars, as well as following Mercury from the point of view of this Uranus transit. Mercury, of course, being in your fifth house, again, another message that you're going to be hyper creative. There's going to be a real desire, a real feeling of a need to be seen, a need to be heard. Your creative output will be really strong. Your motivation to connect maybe with children, or to even have children, or to do something for children, or at the very least express something that you want to share in terms of learning. Fifth house is also around students. It represents students, and so knowledge that you're bringing forth is fifth house, and that's tying back into your third house, which is about how to teach or share, exchange ideas. And then that ties into the trine with Pluto in the 11th, where that's your platform or your audience, or the people you're speaking to out in the wider world or society, that you're sort of answering the question of, or resolving an issue for. The moon itself is in the ninth house, which also brings part of that elevated thinking. It's idealistic thinking. Again, this is part of the introduction, so please listen to that. So beware of the over idealism actually impeding your capacity to create, because you might find that you actually prevent yourself from doing things because you feel like it's not answering the problem at a high enough level. So you have to be happy with good enough, right? So this is a big challenge if you're pushing yourself too hard. Learn to be content with good enough. Um, Right. What else does Aries need to know? Yeah, of course, Jupiter is wonderful in your fourth house, yet it's challenged by what's going on in your life with Saturn, Neptune in your first house. I've done a whole video on all of those different planets, different videos on Jupiter and Saturn, Neptune. So please watch those. I've got a video on Neptune, video on Saturn with Neptune, and a separate one on Jupiter. So please watch those separately so you'll get better insight into this. But at the time of the ingress of Uranus, that's still very, very strong. So those videos, again, apply really, really strongly. And then do watch out for my video when Mars comes to meet the South Node. It's quite an influential time and can be very insightful, particularly for you because Mars is your ruler. So something really different going on for you in your everyday life that can also be impacting health and health issues. Um, I think I'll leave it at that, and we'll see. Oh, maybe I should just mention briefly, of course, that Uranus, as you probably know, was in your second house. Venus was with Uranus and even conjoined Uranus on the 4th of July, just days before the ingress here into Gemini. So Venus and Uranus are still exchanging ideas around the last 7 years and how things have changed. So do look back on the last 7 years of your life since May of 2018 and how things have changed for you in relation to your family, to all the different dynamics of your life that support you, your income and how you manage money, how you manage property that's movable property, your possessions and things, and how this might be impacting you going forward in time. So that's it, I think, for Aries, Sun, Moon, and Rising, and I'll see you in the next video. Right, so Taurus, you can breathe a wee bit of a sigh of relief because you were the one that was hosting Uranus for the last 7 years. Since May of 2018, you had Uranus in your first house. Your ruler Venus was also in your first house for the last month, basically. And so for most of June and into the first few days of July, Venus was in your first house. And then on the 4th of July, exactly conjoined Uranus in the last degree of your sign. So now they're moving that story into the second house, which is about your family, how you're connecting with family, about what supports you in life, your value, what makes you feel your value, what makes you relate to your own worth, your own finances, your own possessions. And here we have your ruler moving in there at the same time, which is significant. So you always want to track what Venus is doing. And because Uranus is moving in here for quite some time, you'll want to be aware of how your relationship dynamics with your family is going to change. This is all the more true because Mercury is ruling that second house and it's in the fourth house of your lineage and your family of origin. That can connect to property as well. And Mars itself is in the fifth house of investment, might also connect back to children, where Mercury is ruling that fifth house as well for you. And the South Node is there. So something changing here about dynamics around family, around children, around your creative expression, around what you need to feel secure. Lots of change. So there may be a period of time right now where you're resisting change or not really sure what to do, or there may be even some fear around security, financial security. Know that that's a karmic lesson for Taurus, Sun, Moon, or Rising. It's part of what you're here to know, part of what you're here to learn. And so this is where you want to then practice adapting, being more adaptable. Don't wait until crisis to change. Don't wait until things become really uncomfortable to change. Recognize that change is necessary already. Now, Uranus is also in a trine to Pluto, which has been for the last 2 years already moving into your 10th house of your public face or the way you are and out in the world that can relate to your career. It can relate to your marital status or your social status, accolades or difficulties in terms of reputation. It's the way that people see you and also how you feel what is your aim, let's say, out in the world, your career goals or your ambitions in life. So this is changing too, because it looks like your values will be changing. Your sense of self-worth, but also the values, your moral values are changing in a dynamic way. And that will be very different. The things you value now and your own sense of self-worth will be evolving in a massive way over the next 7 years. Now, because your ruler is in the second house, we know that this is going to be an important signal for you. So really pay attention to all of these second house things. How do I take care of my body? How do I take care of my overall health through my diet? Venus rules your sixth house of day-to-day habits, and as well as yourself, the house of self. Um, what am I consuming? Am I engaging in habits that are self-destructive? Am I overeating? Am I over-consuming in terms of, shopping addiction? Am I overworking in general? Because Saturn, Neptune are in the 12th house, there's a strong story here about breaking patterns that are self-destructive, about getting clear of your highest potential, getting clear of your identity beyond the physical, three-dimensional sense of self. And yet the second house supports you. So it's necessary to be aware of your body, to be aware of your um, intake of food or alcohol, drugs, anything that might affect your body. It's also a reference to your voice. What is my voice and how do I use it? And that's a very literal thing. Am I able to speak and speak up, speak my mind? Or am I also, taking care of my vote, let's say, the way I choose, the things that I choose in life, which supports the third house area of my aims and the way that I choose out in society. So taking care of this is very important. The dynamic around friends and cultivating friendship is very important. There'll be big changes in terms of that. The Gemini always refers to friends. So your friends can feel like family. Um, Especially female friends, or especially people who are dear to your heart. There may be romantic partners that are like friends, or they're people who are in your life who are helping you to stimulate your creative self, your talents and artistic gifts. And Taurus is often known for its artistic, creative gifts and the emphasis on beauty. With Jupiter and the Sun in the third house, this is also emphasized. The same thing is emphasized. Your connection to neighbors, your connection to your neighborhood, your connection to siblings and cousins and extended family. All of this becomes very important. And you want to think of that as something that supports me. So it's not just the material stuff, do I have enough pennies? Or do I, have enough objects? Am I insured? All of these things that Taurus is often focusing on. But it's really also about these human relationships, which are about the vital support that you get to your being, to your heart. A really, really big experience for you over the next 7 years. Second house is the self-worth as well. So recognizing where you put your worth, in whose hands are you putting your worth? That's also part of the Pluto dynamic in the 10th, where there can be a realization that the way that you relate to the people out in the world is changing, must change, so that you're less dependent on the opinion of others for your self-worth. Yeah, so the dynamic where the moon is as well in the eighth house can reference things like shared resources or intimacy with others as well. And the moon is the exaltation ruler of Taurus, so that's significant. So alongside Venus, which is the ruler of Taurus, the moon is your exaltation ruler. And as a result, the moon also carries a significance for Taurus. Um, so it's helpful to look at what's going on behind the scenes in relationship, what's going on in terms of my money or what I receive from other people. Am I nourished by intimacy, or am I running away from intimacy? Is that difficult for me? And how is that going to play out over the next 7 years? So, Taurus, I think we'll leave it at that. It's a lot, but it's definitely a moment for you to reflect on how much you have changed over the last 7 years, and how much, because of that change, you're willing to now change your vision of your self-worth, or the way that you engage around money and possessions, and even your family, and how you connect with all of those things. Good luck with all of that, Taurus. I'll see you in the next video. Gemini, of course, this is all about you. Definitely listen to the introduction because this whole chart has been delineated in a general sense for you. And you are going to be changing. Now, you've had a lot of time of reflection behind the scenes with Jupiter, hold on, with Uranus going through the seventh house. Oh my gosh, sorry about this. My coffee is wearing off. Uranus was going through your 12th house, which is the hidden house from Gemini, Sun, Moon, and Rising. And so it's been a 7-year period of reflection on your inner experience of life that may have tied you closer to your spiritual self, to your spiritual life, to your sense of faith. Your faith would have been tested, no doubt, where there was maybe moments in time where things really felt shaken, and that had to put you on a new footing around faith. So remember that nothing is shaken without being replaced by something else. So again, if you're one of these people who's anxious about Uranus going into Gemini, if you're worried about yourself, recognize that there's an aspect of change that is only coming from the outer experience of self, or the psychological experience of self, another way of calling it ego or the persona. And your attachment to that will make you feel anxious. If you recognize that's not who I am, based on these 7 years of reflection, of the deepening of your understanding of your genuine self, then there's nothing to be shaken. That's the permanent awareness that you are. And it's only the persona, the appearance, and all of those other things which will be changing. And they will be changing because now with Uranus in your first house, you might feel like it's time to really appear differently on the scene. I'm going to show up in the world in a very different way. I might even change my physical appearance. I'm carrying too much weight. I'm ready to shed that weight now. I'm feeling my physical body isn't strong enough. I need to build up muscle. I want to change that appearance. I want to engage in the world in a new dynamic. Now, this is huge because the first house is really where everything else is filtered through. And so yourself, your image of self, your way of acting out into the world, of bringing yourself into the world, is going to be different. It's going to be very strongly influencing all of the other houses of your chart. So relationship dynamics, your career ambitions and dynamics, and your home and your sense of your inner psychological self, all of it changing in a big way over 7 years. The aspects of the 12th house that were also changing was your relationship to perhaps your ancestors or people at a distance, people who influenced you, but in a way that may have not been tangible. And you're bringing all of that forward. So try to understand how important that was for you and how that now is taking shape through you, because you're bringing that awareness and even the dreams, maybe innovation and maybe a way of channeling information. You're bringing it now through you. Some of you may be quite literally becoming comfortable with the idea of being a channeler, especially when Uranus crosses over an important point like the sun, the moon, the ascendant. There's a different identification with who you are. It's going to be like, oh, right, yeah, I'm okay with doing this. This is who I am. Um, that's a huge moment in time. It can be also quite dynamic in terms of relationship dynamics, where it's like waking up one more moment and thinking, why am I in this marriage? What the heck? I'm not this person. I'm not the person that married that person. Nothing necessarily wrong with the person that you married, but that you're so different that you realize, no, this is not for me. Or in the same way, waking up to what you're doing every day in terms of your work, in terms of your career ambitions, and thinking, this is not who I am. All of it needs to change. So it's a brilliant opportunity for a dynamic change. And what can happen is there may be a wee bit of pushback from people who are not comfortable with you changing. They benefited from you being a particular way. They benefited from you being jolly, amenable, social, your usual sort of social butterfly self. And you will have to just stand up against that and say, no, no, this is who I am, and like it or lump it. And so that's also a part of this bigger dynamic of change. You can also bring your inventive self, your intuitive, inspirational, and funny, by the way, amusing self out to the fore as well, because it may have been a bit bottled up over the last few years where you may have felt a little bit like I just need to step back from everything. It's been overwhelming, too many things going on, and now I'm ready to step into the next thing. You've got Pluto in a trine in your ninth house with a sense already for 2 years of having a different reason for being here. So Pluto has already been working on this territory of why am I here? What's my purpose? What do I do in life? And what do I have faith in? What's driving me? What's guiding me? How do I maybe communicate that in a way that educates people? Or how do I learn from people that I can transform myself with? And so finding new people in your life, whether it be on an interpersonal level or on the level of how do I learn from people, is going to be wonderful. It's going to be a really huge opportunity for you. Your ruler, Mercury, is in the third house where it's very happy, but Mercury is a little bit stuck. It's very slow because it's preparing to retrograde. It's in a fixed sign. It's in Leo, and it's ruled by the sun in the second house. So there's a part of you that's a little bit nervous about what you might have to leave behind in terms of the change or the focus maybe on family and security that is more powerful than ever. A focus on what you need in terms of emotional stability. Also because Venus is in your first house and she rules the 12th and she rules the 5th, the house of children, house of love. The 12th house is your deeper internal experience, and it's also about relationships or dynamics of people who are at a distance or who are behind the scenes. So there's something here that is also part of the bigger story with Venus, with Uranus at the same time. The Jupiter-Sun conjunction that happened earlier in the month in your second house will already have shown you how important, or earlier in June actually, will show you how important this notion of what supports me is. And that continues to be a theme for a very, very long time to come. It's certainly the imprint of this ingress chart, but especially because your ruler is in the third, there's a lot that you feel you have to say. There's a lot that you feel you need to connect with in your family, in the dynamic around your relationship to friends, your neighbors, your neighborhood. Maybe it's commercial as well. Venus rules the fifth house, which represents entrepreneurship, and the third house is a commercial house. The second house is a money house, and since the sun is in the third, sun is ruling the third, Venus is ruling the fifth, and in your first house, all of which to say that could be a very big strategy for you right now with the dynamic around commerce and maybe self-employment. For example, Mars, which rules your sixth house of every day and the work that you do, is in your fourth house. And the south node there with the north node in the 10th house of your career or your ambitions out in the world may have you thinking, you know what, I really need to work from home. I really need to set up a business that I can manage more, more closely from my own space, in my own way. And whether that's a sort of a side hustle or the main thing, it doesn't really matter. It's something that would be very beneficial for you right now. That's maybe part of the identity that's changing, where previously you were employed and now you're like, no, that doesn't work for me anymore. Or maybe you got fired, or there's like all the Google employees, everybody got a letter saying, people will be fired. So let's talk about mind effing and destabilizing people. Just having that sword of Damocles hanging over your head may be enough motivation for you to say, that's it, now I'm starting my business, or that's it, I'm going to be working as a self-employed person. Saturn is ruled by this Mars. And Neptune with Saturn in your 11th house of gains from your career. At the same time, you've got the North Node up in the 10th, where that big story of the early 4 months of the year was really about this 10th and 11th house. May have you already thinking in that direction. And this is where you get serious about how you reach out into society or how you make your money, what you earn, how you gain from what you do. The moon in your seventh house is telling the same story of relationship that I mentioned before. That dynamic is going to be very strong. So you can expect that your relationships will be different, disrupted in some cases, or novel as well, because you're different. So you're going to be attracting people who are more in alignment with who you are or who you're becoming. And this again is a feature of the next 7 years. So it's not that you have to worry about it on the seventh only, and then you're missing your opportunity, but it's the launching of this new way of seeing yourself. So let the freak flag fly, especially with your Pluto in Aquarius in the ninth, and then trining back to you, changing, opening up to new ideas, new ways of expressing yourself, new ways of connecting with people. It's a great opportunity for Gemini to really be your wacky, funny self. And yeah, Mercury in the third, so great for all of that self-expression. Right, Gemini, make the most of this, and I'll see you in the next video. Cancer, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant, you're having Uranus move into your 12th house, which is a hidden part of the chart. It's going to disrupt your way of retreating, your way of running away or hiding. And so that can also bring to your conscious awareness any sort of modalities that have you escaping. You'll become more aware of that tendency, more aware of things that might actually be uncomfortable or unpleasant that you're running away from. And you realize, oh, wait, there's another way. There's a different way now. I can show up in a different way. Certainly, this is the story of Saturn, Neptune at the top of your chart. I got to make this mean something. I have to do something out in the world that is lasting, that is serious, that is seen as important and responsible. And with Jupiter in your first house, along with the Sun, there's an opportunity to see yourself in a way that feels more confident, more expansive. So when Uranus moves into the 12th house, you can recognize patterns that are unconscious, that are really holding you back. And especially as Pluto is in the eighth as well, overcoming fears, overcoming family patterns, inherited trauma, and inherited patterns of, just not healthy relating, not relating in a way that is satisfactory on an intimate level. And the Uranus there with Venus also suggests that there's a strong implication around housing or home or relating to um, those things, because Venus rules your fourth house, relating to relationship behind the scenes. And that can be whether it's people in confinement, or you working in a confined place, or you living in a place that's in a retreat type setting. The 12th house is all about those places that are a little bit away from society, a little bit marginal. It's also foreign lands and foreigners. And so you may actually, some of you may decide, I really need to get away from where I'm living. I want to move abroad, or I want to live with more people in a communal way, living in a way that's going to be different to how I've lived before, and to resolve this tension of feeling insecure. But the 12th house is also the hidden enemies. Now, I always like to say that the first enemy that's hidden from us is ourself and the way that we operate in unconscious ways. So working on your shadow self is going to be fantastically valuable right now. Understanding, and don't listen to the AI version of the Carl Jung thing. It's tragic what's happening to that great wisdom. So make sure that if you're listening to Carl Jung, that it's actually Carl Jung, there's a real human being talking, or that it's somebody who actually knows what they're talking about, and not an AI generated compilation of Carl Jung. But that shadow work is his own original contribution to psychology, and can be really, really helpful, because you can start to understand what patterns you're avoiding, or what is it that is causing you distress. That is your own attitude to yourself, or your own attitude to your day-to-day life, where you're pulling yourself away in unhelpful ways. So this is a great opportunity to change all of that. And then, of course, hidden enemies can be real. They can be the mean girls. They can be the enemies that you get from people who you once thought were friends. That's Gemini, Venus, particularly in Gemini, old lovers, friends. So there may be some disruption that you're recognizing, especially right off the bat, where you thought, you're like, wow, I thought you were my friend. And here I'm realizing not so much. This is emphasized by the fact that Mars is in the third house of friends, and siblings, where there can be some disruption in the dynamic of the relationship. Now, that's already been part of the change since January, because the South Node goes through the third house for Cancer, Sun, Moon, and Rising. And so the notion of who are my friends is extremely important. And it's interesting because I've been meeting with people who I've known for many, many years while I've been here in Brussels, and who were at times very, very close, and meeting again and thinking, gosh, we're just drifting apart. We're not the same. There's just things that are maybe they were always there and it was kind of okay, but now it feels like, no, we're really moving in a different direction here. You might be feeling that in much more powerful ways. I say that because I'm a Cancer moon and ascendant. So I'm speaking to an experience that I'm having too, in this way, the third house way, where it's about letting go of dynamics around relationships. It's also about communicating and about how you communicate. Mars in the third house can have you extremely forcefully communicating or busy with communication, really active, really dynamic. Perhaps also very creative. Mars rules your fifth house of self-expression and creativity. And Mercury, which is ruling your third house, is in the second house of the voice, but also representing family and what supports you. So there can be a lot of dynamics around money. Mercury also represents money, exchanges of all kinds, and so does the third house where Mars is currently there. So there may be something that you need to deal with around money, and that's going to tie into your career because Mars rules your 10th house of, at the very least, your social status if you're no longer working, or if you're lucky enough to not have to be working. This will affect your social status and how you engage out in the world as well. So lots and lots of change. Your ruler, of course, is the moon, and that moon is in the sixth house. So it feels like there's a strong impulse to continue a project or to work really hard at this time. But there also should be, at the very least, an equally strong focus on your health. The sixth house is all about our daily habits. What do we feel supported by? Are our daily habits working? That means when I show up for my job, is that working for me? Or is it working against me? The food that I eat, is that working for me? Is that working against me? Do I exercise? Do I not exercise? Do I care for children or pets? All of those things are included in our daily habits. And in that way, it reflects our health. So health is not specifically the topic of the sixth house, but how what we do affects our health, or how what we do affects our work is that topic. And so all of the duties and obligations that come there may feel quite important right now because Jupiter is in your first house, lighting up that sixth house, which is very much about your sense of what do I do every day. And this is why cancers are so busy, and also why they're so changeable, because Jupiter rules the sixth house. Lots of dynamism, lots of engagement every day. Now, this is quite literal with this chart. So be careful that that tendency to overgive, overdo, feeling obligated, or feeling there's an idealized desire to serve, that can be part of your undoing, because with Uranus in the 12th, it can reflect how your health will balance in or out psychologically or emotionally, and of course physically as well over these next 7 years, especially in this summer. Have we covered all the bases? I think we have. So if you want to know more about Jupiter in Cancer, or if you still want to know more about Saturn, Neptune in Aries, I have videos about all of those things. Please look at those videos. And of course, I have loads of videos also of Pluto going through Aquarius. So big new changes in your everyday life are to be expected, but it's coming from the inside out through that 12th house channel, which, by the way, also can represent, as I mentioned, in terms of living, foreign lands, foreigners, people from abroad. Oh, Venus also rules your 11th house of your audience, people you connect to, perhaps also through the internet, or your how you reach out into social media, or your students or whatever. And that could also be something that you're expanding into, because the eighth house is passive income, or income that you receive from clients and others. And the 12th house is also that connection to people at a distance, and Uranus is all about the technology, the use of technology. So there you go. Third house focus on teaching, sharing information, and learning for that matter. So there you go. Take my astrology course and you'll find out more. All right, I'm going to switch back now to the actual Ingress chart. because then we can come to Leo rising at the exact time. So for Leo, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant, we see that this is happening in your 11th house of the future, the vision that you have for your life going forward, the way that you connect with groups of people, how you connect and bond with friends or networking with people who share ideas or beliefs with you. The 11th house is also the gains that you have from what you do. And with Uranus here, that can change quite dramatically. As a Cancer rising, I had Uranus just now in the 11th house. Of course, different energy because that's Taurus for Cancer rising. Here we're talking about an air sign, Gemini. But what I can say is that really forced me to get online in a public way. I had been teaching online or meeting clients online really since 2015 via Skype and then Zoom. But actually, it forced me onto YouTube. So way out of my comfort zone. So this can also be for you, Leo, an opportunity to put yourself out in that space into a bigger field, casting your net wider into the general public or into society or into a service for others. Now, Mercury, which is ruling your 11th house, is in your first house. So this does suggest that that's part of your way of interacting at this moment, that you're really coming to a place of recognizing you have a message and there's something that you want to say that's very personal, that you can exchange ideas and bring it out into the world. Mars is ruled by that Mercury in your second house, so this can also be very connected to your values or your sense of self-worth, but also income. So you might be motivated by money to do this. And one of the reasons I ended up on YouTube, again, just using that example, it's only one of many potentials, was that I was seeing that the clientele that I had in my local space was becoming insufficient for me to actually be able to support myself. So I needed to cast my net wider. So this is also very potentially one of your motivations here, that money or personal security is part of the story. The sun is your ruler, so your ruler is in the 12th house at this point, and it's of course going to come into your sign within 2 weeks of this journey of Uranus into your 11th house. And so you're reflecting on things from a place of deep introspection that may connect you to ancestral stories or people who are more like spiritual guides. Your spiritual awakening or spiritual understanding might be part of this dynamic as well, especially as Jupiter is now there. There's going to be a lot of focus on what you have faith in or what's coming through you in terms of more mystical stuff, whether that be your own personal spirituality, which is very important for Leo because your ninth house is Mars. It's Aries ruled by Mars, which is very individualistic. You have your way, your faith, your ideas about all of that. And now with Jupiter and your ruler, the sun, in the 12th house is a bigger opportunity to focus in more deeply on yourself from the inside out. And also the North Node ruled by Jupiter in the 8th house is speaking loudly to that as well, coming from a place of mystery, coming from a place of the unknown, and also coming from a place of understanding your family story, the ancestral story. What did you have to deal with growing up? What were the things that were taboo or subjects that you need to overcome psychologically or in terms of intimacy as well? 12th house is also bed pleasures, and the 8th house is the house of intimacy. And yeah, Jupiter from the 12th is ruling the 5th house where we find the moon, which is relational dynamics in love and romance, but also children, which are, of course, a product of intimacy. So this may have something to do with all of that. You may be falling in love or finding a new way to love. With Pluto in the 7th house already for 2 years, you will have certainly changed your relational dynamics. Yeah, and Mars rules your 4th house of home and family, what grounds you or what stabilizes you, what makes you feel secure. And with Mars in your 2nd house, also of family, but also money and values and the connection that you have to all that, what supports you, you're working hard at this point on your own, doing it yourself to find that support. So definitely an opportunity for you to expand your connection to what you need to feel more secure. 12th house is hidden enemies. Not such a bad problem when Jupiter is there, except potentially for self-indulgence, especially because the moon is in the 5th house of what you love to do. And that tie-in with the Jupiter in the 12th, ruled by Jupiter in the 12th and the moon ruling Jupiter, can be issues where you recognize that too much self-awareness, selfishness, self-indulgence can actually be a real block to you right now. And that won't take you where you want to go. So this is a real insightful opportunity if you say, well, now this is my new vision for the future. I'm seeing myself in a different way. Saturn, Neptune up in the 9th. I've done many videos on this. You'll hear a lot more in those videos, including also with Jupiter in separate videos. And of course, the nodal axis separate videos available for you there. But just in a nutshell, that's also where part of your focus is on what is my purpose here. And so when you can understand where maybe there's a diffusion of energy, you're not really focusing or focusing in a way that might not be constructive, you start to get down into business. So that will especially become more clear through the Mercury retrograde in your sign. And then once the sun moves into your sign just weeks from now. But this is the overall flavor for you of Uranus in the 11th. It's very hopeful, very different. Your future looks bright. Gotta wear shades. And so this is an opportunity for you to really shine into your future and cast that net wide and have a sense of, okay, I know now why I'm here. And I'm working through that over these next few years. So good luck with that, Leo, and I'll see you in the next video. And Virgo, sun, moon, and ascendant, this is at the very top of your chart. So hugely important. This is a vastly important year. This year, 2025 and 2026 are massive for Virgo, sun, moon, and ascendant because you've got the nodal axis in your 1st and 7th house, with the south node changing you and having ways of seeing yourself in a different way and shedding patterns that are causing you personal frustration or dissatisfaction. And Mercury, your ruler, is in the 12th house. So it looks like you're really intuiting your way forward here at this time. You're thinking deeply about these things, or you're in conversation with yourself or others in a way that is trying to understand patterns around your unconscious behavior, what drives you, what motivates you, what doesn't, what holds you back. And especially because Uranus is also ruled by that Mercury in your 10th house, where we also find Venus, which is referencing your 2nd house of money, as well as your 9th house of purpose. We're really taking a whole lot now into the world, out into society. You're feeling like how I show up in the world is so different. I don't want to be the old me. I don't want to do this thing the same way. I don't want those relationships anymore. I want something better. And especially because Jupiter is in your house of friends and networks and your vision for the future. And it's ruling that North Node, which is in your 7th house of important relationships and ruling your 4th house of your, what you need to feel happy and secure psychologically, emotionally, even materially. This is a brilliant year for that. So you're really leaping into something very different. Your day-to-day has anyway been changing with Pluto going through the 6th of the last 2 years. Your day-to-day rhythm that can include your job, like what do I do for my job, is huge. It's different. And this is a year, especially now with Uranus very tightly in a trine to that Pluto, back and forth really strongly for the next year. And it maintains itself, by the way, for many, many years to come. So your day-to-day work is going to be quite different and innovative. You're going to be stimulated to make big changes, and that will be coming through an aspect that is familiar to you because it's Mercury driven. Mercury being your ruler, you're familiar with that. So you want to be in this place of flexibility. That's part of your your mutable tendency, that you can be flexible, that you can be adaptable. One of the things that Mars is showing up in the 1st house is that you might be feeling a little critical, self-critical, a little bit dissatisfied with what's going on, but use that as don't stick with it. Like, don't hang on to the dissatisfaction, especially don't hang on to the self-critical voice, but rather use it as a momentum to change, move in a new direction. and just say, okay, this is what I don't like, moving on, changing, dropping, letting go. Especially with the South Node in your first house, this is going to be easier to do. If you don't take action on it, it will be done for you, and that will shake everything up. So, for example, you might lose your job. But then you'll realize after you lose your job, it's like, well, you know what? I hated my job. So I'm so glad. I just wasn't brave enough to get rid of to ditch it, to say to my boss to, take the job and shove it kind of thing. So this will be you showing up in work, in your career, in your relationship dynamic in a very different way. Some of you can be deciding to get married, for example. Um, Mars rules your house of intimacy, marriage, and bonding, and what you share with others, where Saturn and Neptune are. So that's already a feature or factor in terms of bonding. Um, it rules your third house also, siblings and choice, and how you interact in the everyday. So the fact that there's so much involving you in relational and societal or situational sort of dynamics, that your way of showing up on the world stage is going to be very, very different. Jupiter rules your fourth house, where we find the moon, and the moon is all about house and home. So this can also be where some of you are moving, or I'm now moving in with my girlfriend, for example. My son is a Virgo sun, with Mercury and Virgo, and so he is now moving into, well, they're already living together, but moving into a new place with his girlfriend, for example. And so there's a lot of positive dynamics in this change, but it's about growing and expanding a sense of what is important outside of me. So there's letting go of a tendency to see yourself in the old way. That's the South Node in the first house. That's Uranus in the 10th house. I see myself differently, and I reach out into the world differently. When Uranus crossed into my 10th house, and of course that was a different energy because that was Aries, that's when I became an astrologer. I just was like, oof, oof, I'm an astrologer. I had been doing it kind of, a little bit here and there for students, for friends, for people who asked, and it was fine. It was working, but it was never how I identified myself. Now, when Uranus crossed over into my 10th, and then especially when it crossed over my midheaven, which is in Aries in the 10th, then it just hit me. Just like, well, yeah, I'm an astrologer. And so I was able then to identify myself as such, whereas before I felt a little bit squeamish about calling myself that. I just didn't identify that way. So this can be the same for you, where you have a realization, well, this is who I am. This is how I am. This might even be, something to do with sexuality. Saturn rules your fifth house of love and romance and your sexuality from the place of intimacy and secrets, where now things are dissolving, heaviness is dissolving around that. And maybe you're ready to declare your new preference. Who am I really in the heart of my heart? And this is how I show up in the world. And so a very, very wonderful opportunity ahead for many, many years to come to generate a new vision for yourself. And good luck with that, Virgo. Libra, sun, moon, and ascendant, this is all happening in your ninth house. It's fun having Uranus in your ninth house because it makes you very inquisitive, very open to new philosophies of life, guiding you in different ways through teachers, perhaps, that are unusual, or learning methods that are unusual. But also the ninth house represents travel with a purpose, travel for learning, travel as pilgrimage, travel to find yourself in a way. You're running off to California. That's very old fashioned, but anyway, trying to find yourself. And that Uranus is with your ruler, Venus. So there's something really powerful happening here. You're being called to that ninth house. How is my relationship to God? How is and I use God, you can use whatever word you want, the universe, cosmos, spirit. How is my relationship to my father? That's also the house of the father, and the dynamic around that. People who teach me. How is the relationship to being taught? Is that changing? Am I more receptive to that? Or am I ready now myself to show up and be a teacher, for example? Am I the one who's going to be showing people the way? The moon certainly is in the third house of teaching and showing the way and learning new skills and how you interact with people on a day-to-day level. And that's ruled by Jupiter. It's in a mutual reception, well, kind of a mutual reception. It's it's a minor aspect called a inconjunct or a quincunx, so I'm not sure that that really counts officially, but still they're interacting in each other's signs between the moon and Jupiter in your 10th house of career. So something about your everyday is deeply focused on your career. The North Node is in your house of every day, and you're showing up for work every day, showing up for yourself every day, the habits and obligations that you have every day. And that is a very, very powerful shift that you're in already for quite some time, because the North Node moved in there since January, and Saturn and Neptune have been in there for a few years already in that 6th house. So part of that dynamic shift for you overall. Pluto is in your 5th house, has been for 2 years, trinal to you and trining your ruler and Uranus at the same time. So this is also part of the bigger change coming from how you want to be seen now, how you want to show up, how you can really show up as your true self in your creative self-expression, where there's less concern over what people say, what people think of me. That can actually be a really big obstacle for a lot of Librans. It's a very big concern about social approbation or needing to be okay in the eyes of others. So check that and notice that that can be an issue. The hidden enemies part of your house, and that's also a part of your chart, and that's also where we find all things that are hidden from us. It's behind closed doors or far away places, or the mystery, sort of unconscious aspects of our life, or the spiritual aspects of our life, getting a lot of energy at the moment where Mars is moving through there. The South Node moving through there, ruled by the Mercury in the 11th house, has a lot of focus on your future, or what you want out of your future, or what you want out of society and how you interact with that. And it is a very spiritualizing effect. Your values are ruled by Mars. And the relationship sector is ruled by Mars, the way that you relate to others. You may be realizing that you don't share values with friends that were friends, for example, particularly because Mercury is in the house of friends, ruling that Mars in the 12th, and that's the hidden enemies aspect. So friends who are not helpful to you, you're realizing, woof, time to go. And that Saturn with Neptune in the 7th, it's like, we're done here, we're done, we're moving on. New people in my life, new relationships, new structures for relationships. It's all very welcome, very necessary, very welcome, because it's in line with how you see your life and your purpose and why you're here. It's more or less harmonious, especially as Jupiter's at the top of your chart, with the sun at the moment. So really looking bright. Think in terms of what is the ultimate greatest good, not the people pleasing, not because that's the other thing, is this Mars here in the 12th can show where you're frustrated, where you feel like you need to say something, but you don't know how to say it, and might come out in oblique ways that are not helpful. Mars also in the 12th, again, reflecting the notion of hidden enemies, is like where your anger might be tripping you up, where your unresolved anger, or unresolved resentments, or unresolved enemies. And like literally, I know this person has been a problem in my life, and I need to deal with that. Let it go. The South Node is there. It's time to let it go. So Venus in the 9th is lovely anyway, but the fact that she's with Uranus does show that there's a big part of you and the way that you want to engage out in the world that is based in something bigger now. You're really going to expand your sense of what's important. That can be quite literally through travel. Certainly the travel axis is very strong for you at this time of the ingress. The 3rd house, 9th house axis is all about traveling, moving around, the dynamic around connecting with people. It's very social, just like you like it. And so that dynamic of the Venus, your ruler in the 9th, is very favorable. It's very fortunate. It's a lucky placement. So there may be a desire to learn or teach from a place of new understanding over these next 7 years. So all in all, really, really nice for Libra. That can have you expand your horizons in unexpected ways, because you're meeting people in unexpected ways, especially as Mercury is in the 11th and feeding back into the 9th house. Be social, but change it up. Don't be there with the same people. And have a sense of, I'm ready to learn from everyone. My teachers used to say that everyone is my guru. One of my yoga teachers in India would say, when I'm in the mountains with the donkey that's taking all of our stuff up the mountains, That donkey is my guru. And if you can see everything like that, it's really helpful that you can really recognize that we're learning all the time from everyone. Of course, be discerning in what you're learning, but at the same time, don't throw out information that comes in ways that you feel challenge your sense of self. You need to challenge your sense of self and why you're here at this time. All right, so Libra, good luck with all that, and I'll see you in the next video. Scorpio rising, sun, moon, and ascendant. You are having this in the eighth house, which is an intimate part of your chart. It's sort of a familiar energy for Scorpio because there's a resonance between the eighth house and Scorpio. And it's very much about changing your dynamic around intimacy, how you relate to people, how you relate intimately. That's psychologically, particularly mystically as well, how you relate to the mystical aspects of life and the mystery school things of life, what intuition comes from you. That's one of the reasons Scorpio is so intuitive, is because the eighth house is ruled by Mercury. You're picking up on that messenger of the gods through your unconscious or through the psychological sense of self, through the things that are hidden, mysterious, maybe even taboo. And so you're opening yourself up to all of these different aspects. Now, the eighth house can also represent what you benefit from through others. That means financially. Now, Venus moving into the eighth, ruling the seventh, suggests that this is an opportunity where you benefit from relationships dynamically, very specifically at this time. You're in a relationship that is bringing you benefits specifically in this era. That can be literal, can be financial, or it can be friends with benefits where you're finding more sexual intimacy. Venus is the exaltation ruler of the fifth house, where we find the North Node. That's all about love, romance, and harmony in that fifth house creative way. So there's something here that's quite intimate to you, but at the same time depends on others. And how am I connecting to other people? And it's going to be different. So you can expect that you'll be very insightful. You can expect that you'll have a lot of inputs in terms of your own intuitive wisdom guiding you. This is anyway a very strong feature for Scorpio. That's your kind of your life pattern. It's how you roll. But it's going to be even more powerful. And Uranus going through there, if you're married, if you're in an important relationship and you survived Uranus in the seventh, this is already a good sign, but it can still change the way that you relate intimately. For example, when Uranus was going through my eighth house, that was a time when I ended up getting married and also having children. But I had, that dynamic, of course, is building. It's not usually out of the blue. You already know this is what's happening. So therefore you understand, well, yes, our marriage dynamic is changing because now we're parents and it's not just the two of us. So this can be one way if you're having children, especially with that North Node in the fifth, or maybe the children are leaving. They're going off to university. They're finally, able to afford a home. God help them. And they're moving out. And here now you're back in this one-on-one relationship with your partner. And if it's not the case, then it can also be that your intimacy is coming in a new way. There's a new partner coming into your life. Your ruler, Mars, is in the 11th. So your vision for the future is a really important aspect of this moment in time. How do I reach out into society? How do I reach out into friends? Maybe there's a feeling of not finding your way in society that South Node suggests that there's a feeling of frustration around that, or a letting go of old dreams. This will be the Mars South Node as well. Now new goals are on the horizon. New things have to happen here. Not doing the same old, same old. Mars in the 11th also can have you really focused on what you gain from income, from the thing that you earn, especially if you're an entrepreneur. And the moon is in your second house of income and what you own, your possessions, and what supports you overall. And it's ruled by Jupiter in the ninth house, a very strong Jupiter, both because it loves being in the ninth. The sun is exalted, it's in its joy rather in the ninth house. So that is with an exalted Jupiter and a sun in its joy at the time that it's ruling the moon in the second. So there's a really lovely interchange here around your values, around what you feel is important to you right now, and your sense of self-worth as well, which is boosted at this time. And that will have an impact on how you show up in terms of the intimacy, in terms of your everyday. This is also, and that also can be quite directly related to money, the income story as well. That's part of the bigger dynamic, especially as your career is highlighted with Mercury at the top, or your way of engaging socially if you're not in active employment. ruled by the sun in the ninth. So this is quite a favorable dynamic for seeing yourself in a new role in your career or in your social status. Getting married, for example, becoming a parent, all those different things. Saturn, Neptune suggests that also your everyday life is changing dramatically. So that is going to be a feature anyway of the next few years, but it's in a harmonious aspect or an aspect that you can make work, let's say, based on this eighth house aspect. So it might be that you decide, you know what, I've been a chartered accountant for all these years, and now I actually realize I want to be an astrologer, or my whole thing is actually about shamanism, and that's where I'm going with this. And that's a very scorpionic thing, by the way. So would be very much in keeping with this new sense of what your future holds, where you want to go with all of these things. Could be a really wonderful opportunity for you to recognize where your, life is too short. Let's do this thing. Let's get into the nitty-gritty and really show up in that more mystical, mysterious scorpionic way. Pluto going through the fourth can help you with that, can dig up all kinds of aspects that come through lineage, to people that you've come through in your nation or your people, your family of origin, but also has a lot to do with your psychological self and the way you're developing that way. And this will be on steroids for the next few years, where you really start to recognize patterns that you've inherited, psychological patterns, behavioral patterns, issues around trust or money, those patterns which are very karmic anyway for Scorpio. And the fact that it's also in harmony with your everyday and your habits and how you shape up literally, physically, is also part of the story of the moon in the second. What am I eating? What am I doing to take care of myself? Who's around? Who takes care of me? You're very driven in your everyday life. Maybe you're recognizing now it's time to scale things back or put your energy in something that feels more timely rather than clocking in at a day job. You may actually be one of these people who's actually losing employment. You've lost your job, or your industry is just being phased out, and now it's time to do something new. So jump in, because you have a lot going for you at this time to do that. Do this new thing. It's going to require work, because we see the Saturn in the sixth house requires effort and work. But you got the goods, and you have to think, what have I got coming from within? This is also North Node in the fifth house, bringing knowledge that you have been born with, pulling that in, pulling it in. Jupiter is ruling that from the ninth house, higher wisdom, the higher path, my reason for being here, my relationship with spirit or God or whatever you want to call that. So a really exciting time for Scorpio. I guess the final message I would say is just dig deep. The deeper you dig, the more you really show up in that scorpionic way, the more you will benefit from all of this. So good luck, Scorpio, and I'll see you in the next video. Sagittarius, this is happening in your house of relationship. So you are going to transform yourself through relationship. You will have quirky, unusual relationships. You will have people showing up out of the blue. You will have relationships that you thought, wow, I never thought I would have a person like this in my life. It's going to be quite significant for you. Your ruler is in the eighth house of intimacy, and we see a very strong connection between your openness now, or your ability to expose or be ready to be intimate, and this dynamic of Uranus with Venus going into your seventh house. You may meet somebody because of work, where Venus is there in your sixth, ruling the sixth house, and also ruling your house of friendships and your networks, or the people you hang out with because you share ideas or beliefs or aspirations for the future. So you might be, you're well advised to get out there or hang out with colleagues, or go quite literally with friends and do things that are social, especially as Pluto's in your third, bringing up a lot of change in your everyday neighborhood and the interactions you have with people every day. This could be how you meet somebody if you're looking for somebody, or you might meet somebody out of the blue. You're not looking. You might even be married, and it's like, woof, this person comes and sweeps me off my feet. Love comes in very unusual ways. And then you realize that my marriage is over. I'm done. This is moving on now. And that's part of the dynamic of the Jupiter in the Jupiter in the seventh, and then moving into the eighth, is that you realize it's better for me this way. So Jupiter, especially for a woman's chart, can represent the spouse. And that can be a dynamic that you recognize as influencing your emotional foundation, where you find the North Node. Home can change as a result of this, your relationship to home, but also the inner home, my my psychological or emotional self, my what makes me feel secure financially. Jupiter, of course, in the eighth is very helpful that way. It's in really strong dignity because it's in its own sign. It's a bit less dignified because it's in the eighth house, but nonetheless, it's exalted. Sorry, it's not in its own sign. It's your ruler exalted, and that exaltation brings about some real benefits for you, and that will have a knock-on effect in terms of your home. The other aspect is that the moon is in your sign, and the moon is ruling your eighth house, ruling that Jupiter and the sun. And Jupiter, of course, is ruling that moon. So you've got a tie-in right there in terms of your emotional connection to what's going on. This is how I feel. This is how I'm showing up. This is my need of the moment that is showing up in this new way. So notice that relationships will be coming and going almost in rapid fire. The way that you relate will be different. You will be able to open up and speak to a partner in a way that feels more natural, more flowy, more supportive. You are establishing something through effort in terms of the love life, in terms of your creative self. The Saturn and Neptune ruled by Mars in your 10th can have an influence again on your social status. So your love life or the intimacy that you have for somebody might be changing your dynamic. You become divorced or you end up married. You go from single to married or single to moving in with somebody, for example. And of course, if this is happening on a purely personal level, on a creative level, this will be where you really put your heart into your creative expression. And it's coming from a deep place because your ruler is in the eighth house. It's coming from something you're drawing deep into. The fourth house as well, where the North Node is pulling on maybe ancestral stories, pulling on your unconscious or the feelings of, overcoming, having overcome. That's a big theme for Sagittarius, overcoming, aspiring. And we've got Mercury up there in the ninth house, talking a little bit about this as well. Mercury rules your 10th house. So in that aspirational sense, there's a big story here where you can use your story, use your understanding. Your words are powerful now with Pluto in the third house. What you have to say carries more gravitas than before. The way you're connecting to siblings, extended family is different. It's going to be revolutionized. There's no other way around that. That's also part of the dynamic in terms of the change in the way that you relate. So it'll be also your relationship to family. Mars is at the top of your chart, so the ambition and drive that you have, not only for your career, but also for your life. What are my goals over long-term vision of what I'm here for? And so big story here with that strong pull from the 10th house to do something different, to show up in a new way. The South Node suggests that you're done. You've done the thing. You've done the marriage. You've done the job. You've done that cycle of the career. We're moving on. It's something now different. And if it's not that the marriage itself is ending, because it won't be for everybody, of course, but it will be that way of being in the marriage is ending. And again, this can come through things like now we have children and we're responding to each other in a different way, or we're now an empty nest and we're responding to children in a different way, and therefore each other is going to share this new intimacy evolves because of our story as parents. And Mars is in the house of parents as well. I have a hungry dog waiting for her lunch, so I'm a bit distracted. I think I've said everything that I needed to say. However, with Mercury in your ninth house, visionary, idealistic, that's anyway who you are, remember. Mercury is informing that seventh house. So you might be finding that you're idealizing relationships. Don't put people on a pedestal, or you will be disappointed. That's guaranteed. So make sure that you're open-minded around the relationship dynamic and let new people in and learn from them. That's also the Mercury in the ninth. What can I learn through others? What can I learn through new opinions, new ideas? All right, Sagittarius, Sun, Moon, and Rising. Have a good one, and I'll see you in the next video. Capricorn, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant. This is all happening in your sixth house, your everyday house of, habits and what you do, how you tootle around the house, how you do your job, how which dry cleaner you use. All of these things are changing quite dramatically. The third house, where we find the North Node, has already been part of that story. So the North Node moving through the third house has been putting a lot of focus on your everyday life and your everyday environment and the people you spend a lot of time with. And that becomes even more special because Jupiter is moving into your well, now into your seventh house for nearly a month at this stage. And it's showing you new relationships, new ways of relating that will come back to this place of your everyday experience, the busyness and the way that you communicate, the way that you connect with people. And this has a direct impact also on your everyday experience of life. So what do I do? Am I leaving a job? Am I changing, getting a better job? Venus is in the sixth house, ruling the 10th house of your career. She rules your fifth house of what you love to do as well, what makes you happy. And that's also a dynamic around children. If you have them, or if you don't have them, you may want them, or you've already just had children, for example, and now then you learn how busy your sixth house gets when you have children. It's like non-stop attention uh, for whatever it is, the burping, barfing, diapers, whatever the thing is. There's something to do if you're a new parent in every moment, and this might be the dynamic that's changing you. Certainly because the household is changing overall. And again, that can be a dynamic of emptiness as well as, new fledglings in the nest. With Saturn, Neptune in your fourth, it's been a theme already. Saturn is your ruler, so very important to follow what Saturn is doing. And as it's going to be for the next 2 or 3 years, ruled by Mars, follow Mars as well, because Mars is also your exaltation ruler. Mars rules your 11th house of the future. And here what we find is that Mars is saying, there's something I need to do. There's something I'm ready for. There's something I'm driven by. And this is why I'm here. So there can be this real feeling of needing things to change on a literal day-to-day basis. I don't want this anymore. I don't like that anymore. I don't like my neighbor. I don't want my coffee from that place anymore. I don't want my kids to go to that school anymore. Whatever the thing is, it's big change. When Uranus went through my sixth house, that's when I started to work. I went from being a student to being an employee, and I started to work, which is a huge change. When you're a student, life looks very different to when you have to show up at a particular time and do a particular task with somebody watching over you. So this is another dynamic that can be changing for you, where you're just embarking on another phase of life. Whatever this is, it also seems to affect your money story or your self-esteem. It can affect your family. Again, it's part of the bigger story for Capricorn. Something to do with family, something to do with your relationship to family. It's all changing in a dynamic way. Remember that we're not fully into Gemini yet with Uranus. It will go back and forth. So if this is about your children or about you being a student, because the fifth house is also the house of students and what you are, what you're learning as you go through this life, what you've come into this life with. This is in a process of change. So you're kind of in between two phases here, but you will notice the difference. And this also is important to understand that it can come through in terms of your health. Two reasons really make this stand out. The first is, of course, that it's in the sixth house, which is your everyday habits and how that affects your health. And what we can see here is that the ruler is in your eighth house, and that eighth house can be a dynamic of family trauma or issues around fears or issues around intimacy. And that can be intimacy in terms of your emotions, your psychological self, your sexual self. But there may be something that you're recognizing is a stress pattern. And that's especially so because Saturn, Neptune in the fourth can put you under a lot of psychological pressure or pressure that seems to be coming from old stories, old stuff. The moon is in the 12th house also, so there seems to be an unconscious component to this or an inherited pattern, again, through spiritual or ancestral inheritance, through your own unconscious processes or dreams, what's coming through all of that. And awareness coming through others in a way that makes you realize that there's certain people in your life that are not supporting you. So this is also the house of hidden enemies and confinement. So the moon representing health as well as the mind, represents the body and your mind and the foundations of your mental health. So this could be a dynamic where you start to realize, whoa, I got to slow down and not do so much work. This is a tendency anyway that Capricorn has, which is to be super busy and working. And now you're realizing, no, I've really got to change my way of showing up for my own health, for the sanity that I want in my everyday life. And I change my everyday life as a result of that. So again, keeping in mind that Venus rules the 10th house of your social status, let's say, or how you show up in the world, and that of course can be your vocation or career. You may also meet somebody that you love. You fall in love with somebody. You have a very new and dynamic relationship that is coming through your work, coming through the everyday. You meet them at the gym. You meet them at the, while you're getting your coffee or whatever, or at the water cooler, the old way, on your Zoom call. So this is also quite dynamic. It's very possible that you actually find love, find new loves, find new ways of being intimate because of work and because of things changing in your day-to-day life. So yeah, a big change that you will notice for Capricorn, Sun, Moon, and Rising. And I wish you all the best, and I'll see you in the next video. Aquarius, this is you've been in a period of enormous change already because you've got Pluto for 2 years already in your first house. And now from your house of self-expression and how you create and how you reach out into the world, you have Uranus trining along with Venus, trining back to yourself. So there's a big sense of, okay, I'm ready for this now. I want to do this new thing. I want to show up in a different way. I want new love. I want new opportunities to find joy, to find happiness. It is the house of your self-expression in a quirky way with Gemini there, and that's why there's another way of seeing the energy, let's say, of Aquarius, which is a little bit offbeat, a little bit quirky, is because it's the Gemini on the fifth that makes them show up in this way. This is what I'm teaching in the beginners class. Why is Aquarius Aquarius? So you might want to join me there. And so with Venus there also, it's something with reference to your foundations in life. Venus rules your fourth house, and she also rules your ninth house, which is your vision for what's coming in my life. Why do I do what I do? What's my motivation, my major compelling motivation? So it's a big change that can be quite creative. It can be around children. There can be a dynamic of deciding, you know what, I don't want children, not really interested. That's not for me. Or a realization that I absolutely want children. You might even, especially with Uranus in the fifth house, there may be a desire to adopt. That's that very Uranian fifth house dynamic, especially with the sign of the twins there, the sign of siblings there. So you might think, well, okay, it didn't work for me to become pregnant, so I'll adopt. Or I'm in a couple that's too old or not able to conceive for any reason. Let's adopt. And then, of course, can reference things that are projects around work and creative entrepreneurial ways of working, especially so because your ruler is in the third house of commerce, and Neptune and Saturn will be there for quite some time, as well as the North Node in your second house of income. So there's a big focus on your work and how you do your work, that Jupiter ruling that second house from the sixth house of everyday work and your habits and things, the efforts that you put into your everyday. So you might be primed. You might be one of these people who's really, really ready now to just pack in whatever job you were doing for somebody else and say, I'm doing it myself now. I'm working for myself. Or I'm inventing something, and this is taking, this is moving me forward in my sense of what I'm here for. And especially because your ruler is in the third house, which is super dynamic, with Neptune, which is insightful, creative, innovative, and that's also the attributes of Uranus in the fifth. I'm imagining all kinds of ideas. I'm imagining all kinds of visions. It might be artistic as well. It might be financial. It could be educational as well. Venus is ruling your ninth house, and that could be with reference to what you want to teach, maybe teaching through what you express as your joy, as your hobby, as your thing that you love to do. Certainly the dynamic with your children, if you already have children, will be changing as well. The lives of your children will be changing a lot. And then, of course, the way that you interact with them will be modified a lot. But the way that you interact with everybody is changing because of that Pluto going through your first house. So that's a dynamic that you're already getting used to. And also Mercury, which rules your fifth house, is it's really significant because and it also rules your eighth house of money from other people, or how you share resources, or how you deal with intimacy. It's Mercury in the seventh, so that emphasizes this dynamic of new partnerships, and could be new partnerships in work, new colleagues or business partners, new clients. If you're working in that way, the sun is in the sixth house, ruling the seventh, where Mercury is. Money that you get from new clients is part of what your focus is. It's how you have to maybe step up for yourself, maybe renegotiate fees, for example, renegotiate the way that you accept money. When I broadened my reach through YouTube for the first time in over 10 years, actually 12 years, I was getting people doing last minute cancellations and just being incredibly inconsiderate as a client, and it became very clear that my flexibility, my generosity around my pricing and around the way that I did my pricing was not working, because I was coming across people who didn't have a sense of an interpersonal relationship, and they didn't care. So last minute cancellations for people who work for themselves mean no income, but also lost income because of not being able to fill that appointment at the last minute. And so if this is your case, if you're working for yourself, if you're working through, because I'm emphasizing the work stuff, because that's where really so much is coming through, the money story and work and stuff, what you receive from clients, and also affecting your social status, affecting your career. If that's true, or if it's even around the dynamic in your interpersonal relationships, money stories around that, find the way to be clear. And this is about communicating with that clarity, with Mercury there. Find the way to clarify in advance, so you have a neutral third person authority, which is your terms and conditions, and say, no, this is what we're engaging with here. Take it or leave it. And that way you resolve a lot of problems up front. The moon in the 11th shows that there's quite a lot of idealism around the future, or a vision that you have for the future that is connected to you emotionally, but also in terms of how you want to serve, how you want to show up every day. That's where the moon is ruling your 6th house. Jupiter is there ruling the moon. So there's a tie-in between your vision of service, being of service, and reaching out into the world, reaching into your future. And that is also the house of gains from what you do. And that is another reason why there can be this dynamic here around the earnings story. And although it's not exact at the time of the ingress, just hours after the ingress, we see that there is in fact a square between Mars and the moon. So there is something that needs adjusting in terms of your relationship to money coming in, or the people that you're hanging out with, and how you might be intimate or social with them. Right, Aquarius, make the most of this time. I will see you in the next video. And Pisces, we have this happening in the 4th house. I say we because I have a stellium in Pisces, including my sun and just about everything else. And the movement of Uranus going into the 4th house is going to be about movement. It's going to be literal, physical, moving the body from here to there, moving home from here to there. Lots of change around your family of origin, and the relationship that you have to them. New members of the family can come in, especially as Jupiter is in the 5th. Which is love, and also children and dynamics around that. It may be grandchildren, it may be your own children, it may be that there's movement because there's people that you're taking in as lodgers or something like that. The home base is changing, and that you want to expand that sense of home to your inner home as well, and particularly strongly because you've got Pluto in your 12th house of the unconscious. And so there's a lot of reconsidering what comes from the inside out in your life at this time. Jupiter is your ruler, so there's a creative, optimistic, and dynamic aspect to yourself right now. So you feel good about the future. You feel that there's a lot of potential, and there absolutely is. For the moment, it's a bit stuck because Saturn and Neptune, your modern ruler, if you want to look at it that way, is still squaring Jupiter, although Jupiter is separating from the square, and Jupiter is still just under the beams of the sun. So that means that Jupiter itself doesn't have the mojo yet to get things going, but it will by the time of the full moon in Capricorn. So, which is the 10th of July, I think. And that will be another video. Jupiter also rules your house of career, where we find the moon and Jupiter are interacting between the 5th house of self-expression, or your status around children, or the dynamic around self-expression or creative expression, what you love, lovers as well. It's all affecting your status or your ambitions in terms of your career, in terms of your social ambitions as well. So it's a time where there's a lot going on in the intimate aspects of your life, but it's impacting you in terms of how you show up, because the North Node in the first house is making you feel different about yourself and how you reach out into life. There's a lot of attention on who you need to be at this moment. Yeah, and Uranus is with Venus. Venus rules your third house of friends and how you communicate things, how you learn things. Venus also rules your house of intimacy. The eighth house is also inheritance, or how you share money with other people, how you share psychological and spiritual intimacy, money, of course. And so there's a bigger dynamic here that's going on in terms of what makes me feel safe and secure psychologically, emotionally, and actually literally. That is a big theme for Pisces anyway, because of that Saturn Neptune in the second house, which does reference family, what supports me, um, and and how do I get money, and how do I organize my money? How do I take care of, be responsible around money? This is a big question for a little while to come. Um, because Saturn and Neptune are there for a while. I've done other videos about that, so please look at those. I've done videos also about your ruler, Jupiter. So please have a look at that. You'll get way more detail than here. But this Uranus is in the fourth house, squaring your sense of self. And so part of this change is not just about moving house, or the dynamic around your relationship to your family, family of origin and lineage, but it's also about this need to change. There's an agitation in terms of who you are, and that's supported by that North Node in the first house. It's I need to be different. I need to show up differently. I need to be more of myself. And so, although it can feel destabilizing at first, because it's literally the ground shaking beneath your feet, the Uranus in the fourth, it will feel comfortable in the sense that you're a mutable sign as well. Where Uranus is in Gemini, it's a mutable sign, and so you're used to being different. You're used to showing up in a less stable way, and for good or bad, and that means that you're ready for this change. You want this change, but it's going to happen. The more conscious you can be around it, the more you will benefit from it. So you want to make it also a little bit deliberate, especially with that Saturn Neptune in the second. Mars in the seventh suggests that there may be some issues around relating or around money, because there can be some maybe differences of opinion, or more of a sense of urgency around relationship, or a drive for relationship that may feel frustrating. There may be an issue about not being on the same page in terms of your values if somebody is already in line for a relationship with you. Mars rules your ninth house of your vision for life, your sense of higher purpose and your philosophy of life, your guiding philosophy, but it also rules your second house of values. And so for Pisces to have Mars in the seventh house can feel like, I don't get this person, or this person doesn't get me. And that, especially in the dynamic of Venus with Uranus in the fourth, may feel destabilizing around relationship. So either this needs to be worked through, or you are realizing it's not going to be worked through. This is not what it is. But this is not your last rodeo. You will have opportunities to meet new people. Jupiter is in the house of love, lovers, love affairs, romance, and then, of course, the expansion of sense of creative expression, including children or even your entrepreneurial gifts as well. Where you will have opportunities. You'll have a lot of opportunities to meet new people. The South Node in the seventh can have you meeting fated people, like people that you just had to meet. It was like, this is past life stuff, and we just have to be together. And that's not always easy, especially as Mars is indicating there's something going on there that's not so easy. So just because it may feel like your so-called twin flame, or your so-called soulmate, that can be the person you need to quickly learn and then run away from as fast as possible. It's not the Disney version that a lot of people think it is. So this can also be true. So if you're finding that a relationship that you're in is abusive, or non-committal, or it's the same old, and you're realizing, why is this taking so long? Why is this not working? Just move on, because there will be other options. Jupiter again rules your house of reputation, where the moon is. So for whatever is going on here, you're concerned with that career reputation, or the social approbation, the social reputation, or maybe you're reflecting a lot on your parents, because also fourth house is the part of the axis. The fourth and 10th is your parents' axis, the mother-father axis, the parental dynamic in your in your life, and there can be big shifts with your parents, and I'm certainly going through that right now. And so that can also be a part of the dynamic of what you're letting go, what you're moving into in a new way that is about being different yourself. Now I'm different. I'm moving into a different frame of reference because there's a big shift between me and my parents, for example, or me and my children, intergenerational difference. So either way, you're working on your, let's say, strengths, which is the intuition, where Pluto is in the 12th, and the gut instinct and the intuition that comes from Uranus being in the 4th house. So you're going to be building on that for quite some time to come, and use that, but do then something solid, dependable, lasting with the Saturn Neptune in the 2nd house of money, income, what supports you. Think long term, think practical. Not always easy for Pisces. I say that I'm the first to raise my hand. Um, and think in terms of what am I doing in my everyday? So that's also the ruler of this in your everyday. What's my everyday habit doing that's either supporting me or not supporting me to get to where I need to go in terms of my health, my work, or my everyday sense of being grounded or being established in something helpful. I think we've said it all, Pisces. I wish you all the best, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.